Okay, Mark, M-A-R-K, Lanier, L-A-N-I-E-R. I'm coming to you first as lead trial counsel, along with my trial counsel in charge as well, Pete Weinberger. And we have just gotten the jury verdict from a landmark decision dealing with 3 of the national chain pharmacies in opioid litigation. In Northeastern Ohio, a jury has just found that by unanimous decision, that Walmart, Walgreens, and CVS pharmacies, from their national headquarter perspective, significantly contributed to the public nuisance that is the opioid epidemic found in 2 Northeast Ohio counties, the county of Lake, L-A-K-E, and the county of Trumbull, T-R-U-M-B-U-L-L. This is a landmark decision because it's the first time that the issues of opioid epidemic have been tried against these national chain pharmacies. It is the contention of the counties that the chain pharmacies failed to follow the law that required they exercise corresponding responsibility to that of the prescribers when it came to dispensing these controlled substances. These are drugs that are highly addictive. These are drugs that are important in the right place and time. And through this trial, the jury was able to assess those national measures that have been put in place by these pharmaceutical chains and shout out from the rooftops, inadequate. Pete, what am I missing?
Well, the other thing that is important about this case, and frankly important about all the cases that we have brought against the pharmaceutical industry, is that this case will lead the way to a remedy to abate the public nuisance that was caused by these defendants and created harms to the public safety in our communities, not only in Trumbull and Lake County, but around the country. And this is the first time that a jury has spoken that these 3 defendants, these pharmacy chains, are responsible for creating that public nuisance.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know how this is best done. If we're doing the questions via DM to Katie, then Katie may want to pose them now or may want to pose them later, but we'll step off screen and bring onto the screen. You've already got April Caraway, who is Trumbull County, but we have 2 Lake County representatives here as well, Ms. Kim Frazier and Mr. Jason Boyd, along with the specific lawyer for Lake and Trumbull County, Mr. Frank Gallucci. So we'll step away and give them screen time.
Let me go ahead and start. Good afternoon. My name is Jason Boyd. I'm the county administrator for the Board of Commissioners in Lake County. We're about 20 miles east of downtown Cleveland. This is just a very gratifying day on behalf of the 230,000 residents of Lake. I'll let Ms. Caraway speak for Trumbull County. It's been a ride the past 4 years. I can't thank the legal team that's in the room today, Mr. Gallucci, Mr. Weinberger, Mr. Lanier, and all the attorneys who've put countless hours into this initiative. Lake County has always been viewed as a leader when it comes to our social service programs in the county. We know firsthand what's been going on the past decade and a half. And today's news is only going to accelerate our efforts to provide the best services we can to our family, our children, our foster parent associations, our criminal justice system, our job and family services department, to name a few. So, on behalf of the commissioner's office and the 230,000 residents, I can't thank everyone enough, and especially the jury. And these folks took approximately 2 months out of their lives and gave it their all, and were very thoughtful and deliberate and understanding the true nature of this opioid issue. And I can't thank them enough. So thank you.
Yeah, the jury, I think today really gave voice to the families who have been victimized by this epidemic in our community. And truly in Lake County, we have not had a corner of the county that has not been impacted by this epidemic. So the same pills that flooded Main Street in Painesville, flooded the cul-de-sacs in Kirtland and the rural routes in Madison. Every corner of our county was impacted. And again, as Jason said, this verdict gives voice to those individuals and those families who have been so traumatized.
And I would add that this verdict gives us hope. It allows these two communities, these two counties, to move forward with the resources that will be necessary to fight this epidemic right in their very homes. It also sends a message for the rest of the country that this epidemic can be fought by looking at the proper defendants, looking at the manufacturers, the distributors, and the pharmacies, and recognizing that with all of the litigation, all of the efforts that all these communities across the country are putting forth, we're going to be able to move forward and stop this epidemic from continuing to grow. April, I don't know if you'd like to add anything for Trumbull.
Yes, thanks. And especially we want to thank, the jury. They took a lot of time. It took so much time out of their lives to really look over things, listen, and understand what was going on. And, not just in Ohio and our two counties, but across the nation, the opioid crisis continues. And it started with the pills. And anyone, that we're trying to still get into treatment 15 years down the road, the story is, I started out on the pain meds. So we appreciate, some vindication. We want to thank, everyone who, made a difference through all this. And we really, this was difficult, but we wanted to do it for the people who've lost people. And we want to help others, especially kids. We need to do much more with prevention efforts so that, we can stop this crisis and have our counties move forward.
So I don't know how
I think Joe Rice is supposed to go next.
okay. Joe, are you gonna say something?
Thank you very much. I first want to thank Kim and Jason and April and other leaders like them throughout the country that stepped up and decided they had to take action to help address the devastation that the opioid epidemic was having in their community. If they don't step up, we don't have the opportunity to put these cases in front of juries. The second thing I'd like to recognize the dozens of law firms throughout the country that have worked with our MDLPC and provided support, provided their dedicated time and their resources of all kind, including funding for this massive litigation. Mark and Pete were great spokespersons for the trial team, but they had a massive army of lawyers behind them, and I thank all of them for that. I've said several times that after the California and Oklahoma decisions, that when you have a massive public health crisis like we do in this country, in opioids, like we did in asbestos, we're going to try a lot of cases. We're going to lose some, but we're going to win this war. And at the end of the day, the American juries are going to tell the manufacturers and the distributors and the pharmacies that it's time for them to step up and take their share of the responsibility for the devastation that flowed from their sales of the opioid product. For the 15 years now, they've been counting the money. It's now time for them to pay the communities for the damage they caused. We look forward to continuing the second phase of this trial and determining the economic recovery for these counties and to pursue this case around the country until we get a national solution to this opioid epidemic.
Thanks, Joe. For our first question for you, how could this verdict affect discussions to reach global settlements?
Well, you can be sure that the message from this jury is going to be talked about in the boardroom of every corporation that's in the pharmaceutical chain and that's involved in this litigation now, and some that know they're going to be involved in the near future. So the time for them to try to make a reasoned resolution is before we end up with a lot of jury verdicts. So we look forward to the opportunity to meet with them and hopefully put together a global resolution that helps all subdivisions across the country that stepped up and led this litigation to come forward now and try to do something for their communities before it gets worse.
Okay, and the next questions are probably best for the trial team. And again, these questions are all centered around next steps. So I'll let you all.
We are here.
Wonderful. So the next series of questions are how are the damage portions of the case going to work? Do we have a first hearing scheduled? And what is the timeline for damages in this case?
So the next phase is going to begin either early April or early May. The judge has given us a couple of dates where he has set aside about 8 or 9 trial days to hear the second phase. And the second phase is our opportunity to present to the court, and this will be a decision made by Judge Polster, not by a jury, but to present to the court all of the elements necessary to abate the epidemic. So we have health economists, we have epidemiologists, we have people who have come into Lake and Trumbull counties and evaluated what it is in terms of programs that are necessary to provide treatment for addiction, alternative medical treatment, education to the communities, help with foster care, help with the judicial system and with law enforcement. These are all national experts who have evaluated and actually published not just in expert reports in this case, but in the literature, the national recognized peer-reviewed literature of what it takes at the community level to abate, what we call abate or do away with the epidemic. And so that's the next phase. We've already submitted our expert reports. The defendants have them. There's some procedural issues that are going to follow, but we'll be ready to try the case in the second phase, either in early April or early May.
And 2 more questions for Mark and Pete. Following the damages, this is again a question that came in later. What comes next in the abatement phase? How much will each client be asking for, and over what period of time do we expect that to be distributed?
Well, so after an assessment comes from phase 2 of the trial, if you will, and that is a bench trial. So the judge will be making that decision. The damages that we'll seek will be north of $1 billion for each of the 2 counties, 1.1 billion and 1.3 billion. Should the judge find in favor of those numbers or whatever numbers he assigns, I'd love to say that the money will be dispersed and the problem will be abated and we will see thriving communities overnight. But regrettably, that won't be the case. We expect that the companies will appeal these decisions, that they will appeal them all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's a process that can take years. In the event the case is resolved or the cases are resolved and there's a settlement, then depending upon the terms of the settlement and when the money is funded, is when the counties will be able to put that money to use. But the counties already have programs in place that are ready to be funded. Both counties are thoroughly on top of this and have been hopeful and anticipating that there may be an opportunity to do much more than they've been able to do with the economic handcuffs that they've had thus far. And so that's what the counties are excited about. And our goal is to try and get them those resources as soon as possible so that they can continue to try to restore the health and safety of the community, which has been endangered through this tragedy.
And if I could just add to what Mark said, what is, these seem like large numbers. But what we know from the experts and frankly, from people like Kim and April, we know that this is this requires a long-term solution. This is not just something that you throw money at today or for the next 6 months or for a year. The nature of the addiction and the problems associated with addiction have to be looked at on a long-term basis over periods of 10 or 15 years to make any dent whatsoever in the problems that have occurred as a result of this opioid crisis.
And this next question, Joe addressed some of it, but given the rulings this month in Oklahoma and California, how confident is the PEC that today's result will hold up on appeal? And why is this case and similar ones, why are we relying on public nuisance rather than another legal theory?
Well, you got to start somewhere, and the public nuisance is where we started. There are other cases being worked up that may proceed on damage theories as well. We can always go back and try a straight negligence or careless standard. So there's different ways to proceed with these cases. The public nuisance was the one we chose to proceed with because the court controls the remedy. And there was no risk that any economic recovery would be used for anything other than to abate the opioid epidemic. And that's what the clients wanted to have happen. They wanted the money to be spent on Main Street. They wanted the money to be addressed for the opioid epidemic itself and to help those families and those communities. So it just fit perfectly together. And there were adverse decisions by a judge in California and the Supreme Court applying Oklahoma law, which is very unique law, that led to different conclusions. But we got a long way to go. And let me add something here. While these communities will be waiting for the pharmacies to ultimately decide what to do or to collect on their judgment, as Mark said, which could take a couple of years, we do have the settlement with the distributors and the settlement with Johnson & Johnson that's working its way through the system. And so far, about 20 or 25 states have reached allocation agreements with their subdivisions. And in those states, we're seeing large numbers of subdivisions joining the settlement. We continue to have that process going forward. We've got another 6 weeks or so to get that across the goal line. And hopefully the rest of the states and those communities in those states will be able to come together and reach allocation agreements so we can have that $26 billion working its way into the subdivision's hands starting in July of 2022, and we'll start having some money for these folks to use to fund the programs that Mark spoke about. So hopefully that'll get done as well. So this is not a one road game. We've got multiple roads that we're going down simultaneously to try to help these communities.
Well, before we leave, I'll just add one more thing. to the press. Thank you for doing your jobs. We live in a world or in a country right now where a lot of people challenge what you do. And I'm not sure how many people say thank you to you guys, but y'all's willingness to get the word out, y'all's willingness to report makes a huge difference. It makes a difference in what we do, but it makes a difference in this country. So I just can't pass up a chance to, I treat y'all almost like the military and say thank you for your service to the country. As reporters, you're doing an important job.